Alrighty, so yesterday we looked at the Eastern Conference quarterfinal matchup between FC Cincinnati and the Philadelphia Union and Orlando City versus Columbus Crew. Now we're going to look at the Western Conference quarterfinal match, and we start with this video, talk about the Seattle Sounders versus LAFC. And besides FC Cincinnati versus the Philadelphia Union, you could argue this is probably a matchup that a lot of people are talking about. Because here we go again. It feels like every single year this has been a matchup that always happens in the playoffs, which that's not true because we didn't have this matchup last year, but it just feel like this is a matchup that we've seen this before, and that whenever both of these teams get against each other in a big stake of a game, you know there's going to be some big things and some crazy things that is going to happen. Now that being said, in terms of the all-time meeting, LAFC does leads the all-time meeting with an 8-4-5 record over the Seattle Sounders, but keep in mind the Seattle Sounders have won two of the three playoff meeting between both of these teams, and that this is going to be the fourth time that both of these teams will meet each other in the knockout round. Well, technically it's only the third time, but it will be the fourth time if you include the MLS's back tournament. But when you look at the last five head-to-head matchup, well, it was LAFC winning 1-0 against the Seattle Sounders before it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. Then LAFC won 2-1 against Seattle. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. And then LAFC winning 3-0 against the Seattle Sounders. So, yeah, Seattle has had problems with LAFC recently. They have not beaten them in the last five meetings. And that, before, this was always kind of a matchup that is kind of a little even, but now it seems like it's tipping in favor of LAFC a little bit, being unbeaten against the Seattle Sounders in the last five matchup. Now, in terms of the first round matchup for Seattle, they had to go 3 games against FC Dallas. They won 2-0 in the first game, but in the second game, where they were the team in that one, but they just couldn't show their clinical finishing, lost that one 3-1 against Dallas. And then in game three, in a game where, even though they kind of dominate that game, the clinical finishing was kind of lacking once again for them. They end up still winning 1-0 in that one against FC Dallas. For LAFC, they won one of the highest scoring game in the playoffs. In fact, I think this is the highest scoring game because, I know we have a couple of 4-2 reserved between Columbus and Atlanta, but this is still the highest scoring game with LAFC winning 5-2 against Vancouver Whitecaps. And then game two happened. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure if you're a Vancouver fan watching this, you probably are still pissed about what happened in game two, or even if you're Vinny Sartini watching this, I'm pretty sure somewhere he's still probably screaming and flipping the birds toward the referee because this was a very controversial 1-0 win that LAFC had against Vancouver to send Vancouver packing and LAFC moving on into the next round. Now, that being said, as it is the case for most of these games, a lot of days off between all these teams that have been since the last round, and this is kind of something that even though I want to mention it every time when we get to these preview, I'm pretty sure you kind of get the deal that obviously there's a lot of time layoff between the last matchup in the playoffs to the one that is happening in the quarterfinal, especially for teams that didn't go through a 3 game series. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how the fitness level is going to be. But as I said, coming into this game, the key points obviously we meet again. This is the third MLS Cup playoff match and the fourth, including the MLS's back tournament. That, by the way, is the only time that LAFC beat the Seattle Sounder in a knockout matchup. They actually won 4-1 in that MLS's back tournament back in the round of 16. But before that, they have not been able to stop the Seattle Sounders when it comes to an MLS Cup playoff match. They obviously lost in the Western Conference final in 2019 and actually lost in their backyard here too, losing 3-1 to the Seattle Sounders. And then we saw what happened when the COVID shortened season is resumed, where LAFC lose to the Seattle Sounders, and that the last time both of these teams play a playoff match at Lumen Field, that of course is the case. Well, something tells me that LAFC might be more stronger coming into this compared to last time when they finished as the 7th seed. But again, this matchup I also feel like could be very similar to the Columbus Crew versus Orlando City match, where it's kind of like free-flowing LAFC attack versus a stingy Seattle defense. I mean, LAFC, they've been so good in terms of the attack for the past month or so, but they're about to face against a Seattle defense that, yes, they gave up 3 goals against FC Dallas, but keep in mind the 2 goals that they gave up against FC Dallas came in the 15 minutes, and that was kind of the game where Seattle kind of came out flat, but they pretty much shut down FC Dallas for the remaining part of the game. And not to mention, when you have Stephen Fry in net, you know that he's going to be a guy that is going to come up with big save, and I will not be surprised he could come up with a big save in this game too. But you know he's going to be tested, and his backline is going to be tested with this free flow and LAFC attack that has been really good so far this season, even coming into the playoffs, as what we saw in Game One of the series. Now, the third key point is that can the Seattle attack keep pace against this free-flowing LAFC attack? One of the big concern, I think, if you're the Seattle Sounders, is you cannot afford to be down by multiple goals, or even down by a goal really early in the game. Actually, you can afford to maybe do, do so, but you also have to make sure that your attack is on cue, because one of the thing that I am concerned about Seattle heading into this game is the lack attacking threat of this team. I mean, you know, when you look at these playoff games, and even looking at how they've been playing. Yes, there have been a team that has been tough to beat, and that's kind of a good formula to have when you're, of course, playing in the playoffs, because in the playoffs, you know, games tends to be much tense and much tighter, and that maybe you could also argue that that could be an advantage for Seattle, knowing that they know how to shut things down, and they know how they are able to score those crucial goals when they needed to. But what happened if LAFC started to have that free flow attack, and that Seattle will find themselves 2-0 down, and that crowd will be completely out of it. I mean, that's kind of the thing that LAFC will want to do. They want to start out fast, and they want to really put Seattle really on the brink early in this game, and it's kind of up to the Seattle attack whether or not if they can create some moments where they can score the goals. Because again, when you look at so far in the playoffs, they've only scored 4 goals so far in those 3 games against FC Dallas. And in those 3 games, I mean, none of the games you could really say that they look really threatening on the attacking end. And you could even say doing this unbeaten run, that none of the games you could say that they really look like a vintage Seattle Sounders attack. But again, there's that argument that they don't have to be. I mean, that's kind of what Brian Schmetzer likes to do, and that's kind of a thing that usually works very well in a playoff match when things are very tight and so forth. But the question now, I would say, for LAFC is the fact that will this big game factor come back to haunt LAFC? So what I meant by that is that LAFC has had this narrative whenever there's like a big game that is happening, and I think this is definitely a big game considering that both of these teams do not like each other, and it feels like it's a familiar foe in the playoffs. This is when LAFC has that problem of defeat that narrative. Well, actually, I will say that they at least defeat that narrative once by winning MLS Cup. But I'm gonna say what I said before, and I'll repeat it again. If it wasn't for that Gareth Bale header, we could still be having that discussion about LAFC and the underwhelming kind of things that they've done so far in this league. I mean, yes, they have won a couple of supporter shield, but you know, we know that in the end, what really matters in this league is MLS Cup and these major trophy. And so far, you know, yes, they of course show that MLS Cup thanks to Gareth Bale scoring that header. But if it wasn't for that, there have been a lot of legacy of failure, and a lot of games that you could consider to be big game factor, and games that you would expect LAFC to really win that game to prove that they are the superior team, not only in MLS, but even in the CONCACAF region. And they simply just haven't done that. I mean, this year alone, you can see there have been some big game factor where LAFC has completely faltered. Going back to the CONCACAF Champions League final against Leon in that second leg affair, they had a chance with that home crowd and have the advantage after getting the away goal against Leon, and all they need to do is win the game or draw the game, and they weren't able to do so. And then you even look back in the Leeds Cup in that game against Rayados, they were 2-0 up at home in that one. They had the momentum to win a big kind of game again, take down a giant in the CONCACAF region and the Liga MX region, and they absolutely choked in the last 20 minutes of the game. So that's going to be one thing that could be a concern. And not to mention, we've seen this happen when LAFC play against Seattle, especially going back to that 2019 game in that Western Conference final. I still remember that was the game they went up 1-0. Looked like things were going well for them, and then they shipped goals and end up losing that one 3-1 against the Seattle Sounders. So again, if LAFC want to defeat their narrative that they can't perform when the big game is happening, they can't they they have to need to win this game and prove people that, hey, yes, we have had these kind of big games before where we aren't able to pull through, but we're now showing that that's kind of the case now, and we're defeating that narrative. Because if they lose this game, I can guarantee you that narrative is going to continue with LAFC. Even with the MLS Cup win, a lot of people will say that LAFC still have problems in terms of showing up when it really mattered the most in these big games, kind of affair. And then lastly, I think when you look at the last thing, key points coming into this game, in terms of tactically, which team would dare to play possession type of game and keep possession in this game? Because if there's one thing I know about both of these teams love to play on the transition. In fact, LAFC, in terms of most of their attack, has been generated on the transitional play. So the question is the fact that, if you're the Seattle Sounders, do you allow them to maybe have some possession and ask them if they can break them down? I mean, that could be a strategy that Brian Schmitzer can do because, this LAFC team, although they have shown before that they've been able to break teams down when they are playing a possession game, they're not as lethal as when they're going on the transitional play. And that you can even say the same thing in reverse in terms of LAFC cases. I mean, if you're LAFC, you want to maybe kind of dictate the game a little bit, but then the dangers of that is what happened if they get countered by the Seattle team that also can look to be a threat whenever they go on the transition. So it's kind of one of those games when you have two teams that likes to go on the counter and likes to go on the transition to score goal. Which team is going to be the one to have possession? Because at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to dominate the game and dictate the game. I would think Seattle probably would be that team, and I know Brian Schmitzer will know the concern if they do dominate the possession, and that that kind of plays right into Steve Cherundolo hand, and especially with the transitional kind of threat that LAFC can produce. But they're playing at home. I mean, when they're playing at home, as long as they don't lose the ball in bad spot, they could put a lot of pressure on this LAFC defense, where eventually they'll broke through. Because one thing you can also say that, in a playoff game like that, you gotta also want to dictate the game. You want to be the protagonist. You don't want to be the antagonist where you're under so much pressure and eventually you buckle. So that's gonna be interesting to see the tactical standpoints of which team is gonna be the one that is dare to play that possession game, knowing that there could be the risk that they could get counter because both of these teams have very good transitional play. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of looking at this preview between the Seattle Sounders versus LAFC. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this game. And as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction in terms of this matchup. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. And yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.